Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Barnes, Professor of Business Management here at Lakeland Community College, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the 21st presentation of the 2018-2019 Dworkin and Bernstein Management Lecture Series at Lakeland Community College. The series is brought to you by an endowment of the Dworkin and Bernstein Law Firm. Our speaker tonight is Eric Schnurr, Chairman, President, and CEO of the Lubrizol Corporation. Mr. Schnurr joined Lubrizol in 1987 as a co-op student and was hired full-time in 1989 as a development engineer in the R&D division, which I think you need to think about that. We're hearing from the president, CEO, and chairman of Lubrizol Corporation, and he started as a student worker, just like all of you could be able to do. He's held a variety of positions across numerous product lines within Lubrizol, including technical and commercial roles. He has been product manager, global business manager, vice president, general manager, and president of Lubrizol's Advanced Materials. Most recently, he was president and chief operating officer prior to assuming his role in January 2017. Throughout his career at Lubrizol, he has also worked at several company facilities, including an international position in Singapore. Mr. Schnurr earned his Bachelor's of Science in Chemical Engineering from Pennsylvania State University in 1989 and his MBA from Case Western Reserve University in 1994. He serves on the board of directors for the American Chemistry Council and the Greater Cleveland Partnership, and also serves on the Case Western Reserve University Board of Trustees. Please join me in welcoming Eric Schnurr, President, CEO, and Chairman of the Lubrizol Corporation. Thank you very much.
All right, good evening. Hey, thanks for spending a little bit of your evening here. How many of you have heard of Lubrizol? How many of you think you know what Lubrizol does? How many of you think you used a Lubrizol product today? What kind of shoes are you wearing in the white sweatshirt here? What kind of shoes do you have on?
Nikes.
Did you raise your hand?
No.
So Air is Nike Air, right? It's Nike Air.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of you may have wondered why I was looking at your feet when you came in the room tonight. Lubrizol has their polymer in every pair of Nike Air shoes as just one example. Of course, most people think of Lubrizol as a lubricants company, lubricant additives company. I'll talk briefly about that. But what I want to do this evening is tell you a little bit about Lubrizol as a company. So those of you who haven't heard of it or know something about it, those of you that raised your hand maybe know a little bit more about it. And I want to give you the opportunity throughout the entire hour here to ask questions, whatever's on your mind. If you have a question about something I don't talk about, feel free to ask a question about it. We'll save some extra time at the end for questions, okay? I'll also give you a little bit more of my background, not in great detail, but to give you a little bit of sense of what I did in my career. And also, when I talk to groups of students, I have some things, the top 5 things I wish I knew when I was a student. It may be different for you, but those are the things that I wish I knew when I was sitting in your chair. So let's first talk a little bit about Lubrizol. We celebrated our 90th anniversary in July. Lubrizol started in Cleveland, on Manor Avenue in what is now East Cleveland, and moved to Wickliffe, which is our corporate headquarters today, in 1931. I think we're going to stay there for a while. We first became a billion-dollar company in 1987, which was I had nothing to do with it, of course, but that was the year I joined the company as a co-op student. And we were a public company. You could buy Lubrizol stock. It traded under the ticker symbol LZ until 2011. And guess what happened in 2011? Does anybody know? Mark and Capi, you can't answer this question. What happened in 2011 to Lubrizol?
Did you get bought out?
We did. By who? Oops, wrong way. We, since 2011, have been part of Berkshire Hathaway. So Berkshire Hathaway is one of the largest companies in the world. Market cap, depending on what the stock market is doing, over $500 billion. And Warren Buffett, to most business students, is at least a familiar name. I told you Warren did come to visit. This is a couple of photos from when Warren came to visit us in Wickliffe and also at our Brecksville facility back in April of 2017. So that gives us something that actually nobody else in our industry has. We went from a public company to basically a private company. Berkshire Hathaway is a public company, of course, but we don't report our financials. We don't report a lot of things that a public company has to report. And we also don't have to worry about stock price and stock analysts and quarterly conference calls and quarterly earnings per share estimates and numbers and projections. A typical CEO will spend 30 to 40% of their time on nothing but that and have a staff of people doing nothing but that. We spend zero time on it. So that's a benefit. The biggest benefit, however, is that Berkshire Hathaway has over $1 billion of cash. What's Warren Buffett's job? Those of you that are in business classes and maybe know a little bit about Berkshire Hathaway, his job is to invest. His job is to invest and get a return. So if we have an idea, we want to buy another company and we can get a good return, we don't have any problem getting access to capital. And those of you that are studying companies and capital structure and financing and so forth like that, you know that's a tremendous advantage. So Lubrizol is very, very lucky to be in the situation we're in. And I'll figure out how to work this as we go along. So when we think about why does the Lubrizol Corporation exist, you've probably talked about mission and vision statements as you've talked in some of your classes. So we actually improve lives. We impact the end user of our products, whether you're wearing Nike Air shoes, enable you to run a little bit faster, jump a little bit higher, hopefully, or you're in half the vehicles on the planet right now, today, use a Lubrizol product. Half the consumers in the world will use today a Lubrizol product. We basically deliver three different things. Efficiency. I'll give you an example in a few minutes, but the Lubrizol Corporation has invested hundreds of millions of dollars. I got to go from the Berkshire scale to the Lubrizol scale. So hundreds of millions of dollars over a few decades in our lubricant additives business, really doing two things. Developing technology that enables vehicles to operate more fuel efficiently and also to reduce emissions. I saw a digital printer going when I went through the Hive a little bit earlier this evening. We make technology for digital print inks. Personal care formulations is something you might not think about when you think about Lubrizol, but half the shampoo bottles in the US today have a Lubrizol component in them of some sort. And what you will often see when you go down the aisle of the personal care products, whether that's in a big box store or a drugstore or whatever, you'll see lots and lots of bottles, clear bottles with stuff suspended, whether they're beads or air bubbles or whatever. It's our technology that makes that possible, among other things. And in cleaning solutions, we have a technology that enables lower cleaning, laundry temperatures, less water consumption, a lot of things around sustainability. Reliability, we make sure equipment runs and doesn't break. We have a coatings business, so we are putting durability on surfaces. Nearly every surface you see, this floor, the wood that you got your arms rested on, the fabric you're sitting on has a coating. The carpet has a coating. Carpet backing has a coating. We're in a lot of those businesses. The reason that you don't feel your transmission, your vehicle shudder or jerk when you start off, unless you're driving a stick and don't know how to drive it so well yet, is because of the technology we put in the transmission fluids to enable smooth, durable shifting. And we don't make the wires inside of that, in that photo that you see, we make the polymers on the outside. We have urethane polymers, we have a variety of different polymer types for wire and cable applications, for durability, and a variety of different things that we do to protect critical systems. And wellness. So we're in every Nike shoe. Nike's a big, important customer for us. Lubrizol is partnered with Nike on Nike's two of their top 4 corporate corporate innovation projects. Some around unique fabrics, where our polymer technology is using unique fabrics, some around the footwear application. The polymer that's in the shoes, what's your name? What's your first name? Nick. Nick? The polymer that's in the shoes that Nick's wearing is fully recyclable. And what we're working on with Nike is a fully recyclable shoe. In an ideal world, there's a little bit of other technology has to happen. Nick can take those shoes once he's tired of them, go into a Nike store and punch up the new ones he wants, and 3D, they'll go back and be recycled, and 3D printing will kick it out. But we've got the materials to enable that to happen. It's not something a lot of people think about. I mentioned reduced vehicle emissions. We have a medical device life science business. So I also walked through the medical lab today, walked into that simulated hospital room, and some of the materials in the catheters and other medical devices could likely come from Lubrizol. And we do a lot of things around coatings, and if you've ever painted something with a solvent-based coating, you know how that smells and how that might make you feel a bit lightheaded. Our coatings technology is water-based. And so we're reducing emissions and making it more user-friendly and so forth. We today are about a $6.5 billion company. We'll probably hit $7 billion this year. We have about 8,700 people, and you see our breakdown of both revenues and employees. We're reasonably well dispersed around the world. About a third of our revenues from North America, a third of our revenues from Europe, and a third of our revenues from Asia. There's some in Latin America as well, as you see there. Our employee population is a little bit more heavily in North America. The reason for that is there's two headquarter locations for us. One is Wickliffe, that's our corporate headquarters. In 2004, we bought the specialty chemical business of B.F. Goodrich, which was on an earlier slide. That business, coincidentally, is headquartered in Brecksville, Ohio. And so it wasn't intended that we buy, that was the largest acquisition the company's made to date. It wasn't intended we buy a company based in Cleveland, but just so happened that that was the one we bought because that was the one that fit. So that's why you see more people in North America than what you see in the revenue dispersion. We're broken into two different business segments. Lubricant additives, most people that know Lubrizol in Lake County from many, many years ago, or our facility out in Paynesville, they think about lubricant additives. So an engine oil that goes into your car. How many of you change your own oil? That's about typical. Not too many people do anymore. But an engine oil that goes in your car, about 30% of that can, or that bottle these days, has components from Lubrizol or our other competitors. It's lubricant additives. That's what makes that work. And then what we call Lubrizol Advanced Materials came from our purchase of B.F. Goodrich. About 80% of that business for us is based on what was in that 2004 acquisition. So what's B.F. Goodrich make? When you think of the name B.F. Goodrich, what do they make? Tires. They still make tires. Well, their brand name is still used for tires. And so what we got was a specialty chemical business of B.F. Goodrich. So there's a lot of polymer technology for those engineers in the front here. And so we have a lot of applications that use pretty specialized polymer technology. So what is it that we think about when we think about our business and the bigger world and how we fit and what we're going to do and invest in, or invest, Berkshire's money in? I think you probably are familiar with many of these things. Rising middle class, increased focus on health and wellness, particularly as people live longer. China is one example, but there's lots of places where infrastructure is being built. We have solutions to a lot of these things. Clean and efficient transportation. Sustainability is something I'll touch on, but that's a really important element of our business and most businesses these days, of course. These are all great opportunities. I'll give you one as an example, and it really has a very, very strong sustainability component, and it's in lubricant additives, and you might not think of it. But this is the impact that our company can have. So on the left-hand side, that's a plot of emissions from a diesel engine, particulates and nitrous oxide. And typically when you look at trying to reduce emissions from a diesel engine, those are the two things you look at. On the right-hand side, it shows you over time what's happened with CO2 emissions and fuel economy in a heavy-duty fleet. This is US data. Those different colored squares or rectangles, depending on what year it is, shows how the emission regulations in the US have tightened progressively over that time frame. Okay, from 1988, when it was a fairly broad range, So you ever seen a big truck with black smoke coming out the stack? That's that kind of technology. And it's every time you see a new shape and a new color there, there's been a new US emissions regulation that has required that the people that make diesel engines make a different design that reduces emissions. Every time that there's a different design of an engine, we have to do something with the technology to lubricate it. And so we are not the ones that are reducing the emissions and improving fuel efficiency, but we're the ones making the lubricants so that those engines can perform. And so you see today, that's just a dot. And we're working to further improve fuel efficiency, working to further improve emissions, and that's what you see as you go into the dashed area on that chart. That's just one example. Sustainability is important because you have to think about what is the impact of what your product does in the end user and also the broader life cycle of that product's lifetime. And that's a really important consideration. It's an important consideration for most of the businesses that you guys will talk about and study, particularly the ones that are in manufacturing a product of some sort. So what is Lubrizol like? There's a couple of people in the audience here also are my colleagues. They could, I think, vouch for this. And it's hard to represent a company on one slide, but I think these are some phrases that represent it fairly well. We're medium-sized, so $6.5–7 billion is fairly medium-sized by most measures. But we have an intended small company feel. It's a very informal. I had somebody from the finance group who'd been with the company a couple of years. He was an intern prior to joining, sent me an email, a real story from last week, sent me an email, said, hey, I'd like to sit down and talk to you about this, that, and the other thing. And so 3 days later, we sat down and talked about what was on his mind. So in a lot of companies, you couldn't get to see the CEO with just an informal email like that. And we like that. We think that that's important. We think it's important that the executives have an open door and anybody can walk in. I mean, it's not literally open all the time, right? There's sometimes that we have it shut because we're talking to people. But it's a very, very informal culture. We're proud of the history that we have. We're very proud of the history we have. We're proud of the fact that we've been in 90 years in the Cleveland, or headquartered in Cleveland. We like to work together. Typically, you will see Lubrizol people like spending time together. During work and maybe after work as well, but we like to collaborate, we like to solve problems. Kapee, Mark, hopefully you don't disagree with any of this. Doing things ethically is a given. We want to treat people the right way, and we want to always do the right thing. We also want to deliver the results necessary to ensure the financial future of the company, but those three things are really what define our culture and what we're trying to do as an organization. And we're very committed to our communities, which I'll talk about. And I think this is important. We are large enough to provide opportunity for people. I've had lots of great opportunity. Most of my colleagues within Lubrizol, I think, would say the same thing. But small enough to provide visibility. So somebody can send the CEO, who's been with the company a couple of years, can send the CEO an email, and 3 days later sit down and have a one-on-one discussion. And we like that. We think that that's fairly unique. I mean, there's some other companies that might be able to say a similar thing, but I think that's fairly unique in what keeps people like me and others who have spent a long, long time at the company. It's not unusual for people to start their career and spend their whole lives there. Now, for a younger generation, I know that seems a little bit odd sometimes, that somebody would actually want to go somewhere and spend 30 years. But you know, if you find somewhere that you like and you find somewhere you think you can make a difference and you believe in what the company stands for and you believe in what the company's doing, it's pretty easy to do. And actually, time goes pretty fast. So I talked about sustainability. Sustainability is a big topic. You all hear about sustainability probably as it relates to environmental impact and probably as it relates to product life cycle and impact on the planet and so forth. And all of that's really important. There's a big social element to sustainability, however, as we see it and as a lot of other companies see it. So when we think about the environment, how we operate our facilities, how we operate our plant in Paynesville, how we operate our plant in Avon Lake and the other nearly 60 plants we have around the world. Of course we do that in a way where we're constantly finding ways to reduce emissions, constantly finding ways to reduce waste, constantly finding ways to reduce energy consumption. And that's something we've been doing for decades, and that's something we'll continue to do. But the impact of our products, reducing emissions, reducing volatile organic components when people are painting or coating surfaces, recyclable materials. All of that has a sustainability impact in terms of the environment. But the social one's really important. From the time of our founding, we were founded by 6 individuals, 3 of them were brothers, strong Case connection, 2 of them were chemical engineer graduates from Case. From the time of our founding, when our founders put the guidelines upon which the company be based, ethics and supporting the communities in which we operate was center to what they believed in and what we continue to believe in. And so we have the Lubrizol Foundation, which donates millions of dollars every year to causes around education. Lubrizol has been active at Lakeland here as an example, and around trying to improve the situation of those less advantaged in our communities. And we believe strongly in that. And so we do it with money, but we also do it with employees' time. We have designated days where we give the employees basically the day off to go do something in the community to help local nonprofits. And then our employees spend countless hours of their own time doing a similar thing. And we're very proud of that. That's not something we obviously require, but is just something that our culture brings out. And it's really important that we are good neighbors and that we're doing our part to help not only continue to grow the company, but continue to grow the communities and the neighborhoods in which we work, in which our employees live. So, the 5 things I wish I knew when I was a student. Write this down. In 30 years, you can write down your own list and see if they're similar. But communication skills will be at least as important as your technical skills. And when I say technical skills here, I'm not talking about chemistry or physics necessarily or mathematics. Anything that you're studying, whatever your subject is, whatever your area of expertise is, IT, nursing, engineering, whatever. That's your area of expertise. Your communication skills will be at least as important, and over time more so. So this is a slide I actually have used internally multiple times, and it's not all encompassing, but a couple things for you to think about relative to communication. If you're in front of an audience like this, try and simplify as much as you can. I don't know how prevalent PowerPoint is in Lakeland or in other universities, but in our organization and in most of corporate America now, it has gone way overboard. When somebody has to talk for an hour, they say, okay, well, I need 45 slides. PowerPoint is great at eliminating dialogue. If you'd rather your audience didn't participate, PowerPoint is a great way to ensure that. So we use the phrase PowerPoint light, which means ideally you can do it in just a few slides. Now, I violated PowerPoint light this evening so I could give you some background information. There are times when you need some, but try and simplify. Try and think about it from your audience's perspective. And I tell people, how many times have you been in a presentation when somebody says, this slide's really busy, I'm not going to spend much time on it, then they read the whole thing to you? That ever happen? If you think your slide is too busy, don't use it. If you need a pointer, your slide is too busy. That's my rule, at least. And then the audience is really important. You're not just trying to fill your time. You're not just trying to fill your time. What does the audience care about? And the phrase at the bottom, I think, is really important. If you're in front of a group of people, your job is not to impress them. Your job is to try to help them. Now, whether this will be helpful this evening or not, I don't know, but that's what I was going for. I wasn't going for impressing you, so that takes the pressure off. But when you're talking to a group of people, you're trying to help them. Okay, so you have to understand what they might be interested in. And then lastly, nobody wants to have slides read to them. Don't think of it as giving a presentation. When I talk to I have college-age kids, and so my youngest daughter in particular is nervous in front of a group of people, and I just say, you're having a discussion. You're not giving a presentation, you're having a discussion. You have discussions all the time. Just think of it as having a discussion. And ideally, you're telling a story. I'm trying to tell the Lubrizol story. I'm trying to make it interesting. I don't know if I've been successful. Okay, but communication is really important. And people skills will be just as important as whatever your area of expertise is, particularly as you advance in your career. The higher you go in an organization, the less you do. And I'm not saying that to try and make a joke. It's the truth. The higher you go in an organization, the less you do. Everything that gets accomplished at Lubrizol happens because of people in the Lubrizol organization that are all somewhere in the organizational charts that ultimately report up to me. But I do none of it. I mean, I certainly have, I consume my day. I'm not just in my office with my feet kicked up taking a nap. I actually consume my day. But the real work is done by other people. If you can't accomplish something through others, you're not going to be able to be a leader. And so your people skills are going to be just as important as your technical skills. You are working, once you start working, some of you probably are now, when you start working for an organization, you are there to add value. Understand how your job adds value and helps the organization accomplish their objectives. It's really important. You have to add value and you have to keep learning. And I'm not just saying that because I'm standing at Lakeland Community College telling you, oh, you have to keep learning. But it's true no matter what. No matter how long ago you were actually in school, in formal school, or how recently you may have graduated, you have to keep learning. Your job would not exist if it didn't have a positive impact in some way on the company. Because in a competitive market, you can't afford to have jobs in a company that don't add value. So understand how yours does. And that'll give you a broader picture of the organization. Particularly if you start in an entry-level position, it might not be obvious to you. But ask questions. You'd be surprised how much people enjoy talking to you about what they do, what the company does. One of the reasons for I started as a process engineer, which was one of my favorite jobs ever, by the way. But I moved into a more commercial area of our organization because one question bothered me. I didn't know how we made money. It was just a curiosity. And so I started asking questions about that, and that led me to exploring other areas of the company and ultimately led me to getting into different positions. So understand how your job affects the company. I think you probably know this, but I would just tell you it's true. Mentors are important. I never in my career had a formal mentor. We do have a formal mentoring program within Lubrizol, and a lot of the companies you will work with or have worked with probably do as well. And a formal mentor is fine. Good, probably very, very good, assuming you've got the right match. I've always had informal mentors. Sometimes I proactively was seeking advice. And within our company and within lots and lots of other companies, there's people that are really willing to spend a lot of time. But whoever you select to be a mentor, formal or informal, they have to know something about you. You can't decide, you spend 3 weeks with the company, I'm going to have the senior vice president of marketing be my mentor. You have to find people that know something about you, your capabilities, your interests, what you want to accomplish, what you're able to accomplish. But find them. There's plenty of them out there. And lastly, be yourself. Why am I at Lubrizol for over 30 years, if you count my co-op time? Somebody asked me that question when I first got into this job, and I said I still remember my very first day when I walked in the doors at what is our pilot plant in Wickliffe. And I was greeted by one of the more experienced chemical operators, named Harold Chris Myers, long since retired. And I was greeted very friendly with a few other people. I remember Harold in particular. It just felt like home. It probably doesn't feel like home to everybody at Lubrizol. That's why not everybody works at Lubrizol. There will be places where you can be yourself. You should always think about improving. You should always think about learning. But ultimately, to be the best you can be, you've got to be yourself. And so find a place where you can be yourself. If you try to be something you're not, it'll be obvious. It might not be obvious on day one, but it'll be obvious. So find somewhere you can be yourself. I was lucky. I found it kind of almost by accident when I was interviewing for co-op jobs. I didn't know it at the time. I knew it when I walked in the door. But you'll be able to tell also. What questions do you have? So this is a question that every company has to answer, and it really comes down, to me, the question you have to ask yourself is, what makes us unique? You guys have all probably heard of Michael Porter. So Michael Porter is a famous professor, works at Harvard Business School, and is viewed as one of the world's experts on just business or corporate strategy. And one of the very simple phrases that he will use is strategy is about deciding how to be unique. You do not want to compete with other people based on their strengths. So in our business, BASF is one of the largest chemical companies on the planet. And they've got strengths that we don't have, but we've got strengths that they don't have. And so we compete based on our strengths. And if we're ever competing head-to-head with BASF, as an example, because they're really good on certain things, then we might lose. If they're competing head-to-head on the things we're really good at, they will likely lose. But the trick is you got to figure out what are you really good at. And so, we've made some acquisitions over time when we needed to add different capabilities and different technology, different talent. You tend to invest that way. So you want to invest new technology, invent new technology, develop and market new technology in market segments where you think you can differentiate versus ones that you don't. So it really comes down to how can I be unique? Because if you can't do something as a company that nobody else can do, ultimately you don't have a reason to exist because other people could do it. So if you and I both make the same thing and same cost structure, same basic capability, Capri won't care who she buys from, right? You probably got a nicer personality, so she might want to buy from you. But basically, if we're both offering the same thing, then there's not a reason for the one to exist. So you really have to think about what makes you unique. Good question. What else? I was enjoying what I was doing. I can still remember my first job as a pilot plant engineer. I can remember the products that I was involved with developing. I can remember the problems we had. I can remember the challenges. I can remember every job that I've had, I've actually enjoyed. I've had the opportunity to go overseas. I've had the opportunity to work in different locations. I've enjoyed the people I've worked with, and I've enjoyed the work that I've done. I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky. If I didn't enjoy what I was doing, or if I worked with a company that I didn't believe in what they were doing or how they did it, it'd be impossible to stay motivated. I would have to have gone somewhere else. And that doesn't mean that you have to go somewhere and stay your whole career. That's not the test of whether or not your career has been successful, because you may, to learn different things, choose to go different places. But you have to have fun in what you're doing, believe in what it is and how the company does it and what the company stands for. And then it's pretty easy to stay motivated, actually. If I stay on this side of the stage, I'm getting some feedback. So over time, of course, we've adopted in a variety of different ways. We have historically used data in a pretty sophisticated way. So we are a company that is full of mechanical engineers and chemical engineers and chemists, and we're always doing performance tests and R&D work, and so we just have an incredible amount of data. So everybody talks about big data these days, right? So we have an incredible amount of data. And we are changing the way that we're utilizing that data. So the discipline of data science is one that you probably didn't hear so much about 5 or 10 years ago. We have a data science group now that we're building, and we're actually competing with some of the high-tech companies for talent. And so the way we do product development, the way we do maintenance in our plants, the way we do our supply chain will change completely. It'll change and become incredibly efficient compared to what we do today. And it's going to become very cost efficient, well, in addition to time efficient, very cost efficient compared to what we do today. That's probably the biggest change. Now, we're also doing a lot of things with SAP systems and automating, business processes and so forth that you hear about. And a lot of the technology that a lot of the companies and the applications that we work with, 3D printing, for example, we're very involved with. So those technology developments will continue to impact our business and gives us lots of opportunity. But the way we think about data today is probably the biggest change related to the whole thing about big data and data science. I never thought to myself, I want to be CEO. I mean, even before I got the job, a year before, it wasn't just something I thought I was going to do. And I never thought to myself, if I don't get to be CEO here, I'm going to go somewhere else because I need to be. I just didn't think of it that way. And I never did. So when I was in my first job as an engineer, like I said, the question that bothers me is I didn't know how the company made money. So I went and I talked to the commercial organization, and I got interested in, and I thought I could learn something. So there's two reasons that I moved to different positions. One was when I thought I could learn something, something new and something that was exciting, was motivating in some ways. And also there were a couple times in my career where I was in a position for multiple years, 6, 7, maybe 7 years probably is the longest time. And I knew that I needed somebody else to come in to do the job in a different way. Because I've got a certain mindset, I've got a certain skill set, I've got a certain approach. And if I stay in one place too long, it starts to become a little bit repetitive. You need fresher ideas, you need diversity of thinking and all those things. So those are a couple reasons. I never thought to myself, I want to be in management. I never thought to myself, I want to be in marketing. I never thought to myself, I want to be anywhere. I was just looking for, am I learning? Am I contributing? Am I adding value in some way? And do I feel like I'm having some kind of an impact? That was always my objective. I want to have some kind of an impact. Now, I wasn't completely altruistic about it. It wasn't like I want to have some kind of impact and I don't care if you don't pay me anything, right? There's something about advancing in a career and all that, but that actually won't mean that much if you're not learning, if you're not having fun, if you're not motivated by what you're doing and what you're learning. So I think generally speaking, the people skills are not that different. So as a CEO of the organization, or if I was back as a pilot plant engineer talking to the operators that were working on the projects that I was responsible for, I don't think the people skills are that different. You first have to respect everybody. It doesn't matter who it is. Genuinely respect, not pretend. Genuinely respect. It doesn't matter if they're sweeping the floor or if they're the senior vice president of something, okay? You have to respect everybody. You have to listen to everybody. You don't have to listen infinitely, and you don't have to listen for hours and hours on end when it's not beneficial, but you know what I mean. You have to listen to what the point is, and the person has to feel like you're listening to them. And try and view the world from their perspective. If you view the world only from your own perspective, and that's not easy, right? It's not easy because you've got your own perspective. But if you only ever view it from your perspective, you're going to think half the world's insane. There's some crazy things that people say, day to day as we're working with each other. And if you really understand what they mean, I don't mean crazy, crazy, but just kind of strange things that don't make sense. You say, but if you understand where they're coming from and you listen and you talk a little bit more, you actually may have misunderstood what they said. So those three things: respect everybody, listen, and try and see it from their perspective. If you're on a shop floor, I talk to operators in our plants today, that applies. I talk to senior people in our company and senior people in other companies, that applies. I never said no to any opportunity. And I never said yes to one that I regretted. But the one thing that people might be surprised at, I had lots of opportunities I was interested in, jobs that I wanted that I didn't get. Multiple, 5 or 6. I wanted to go overseas. I wanted to go to England for an assignment. Somebody else got it. I wanted to go to Singapore. Before I went to Singapore, somebody else got it. I wanted to go into sales in one particular case, and somebody else got that job. Most people will look at somebody with my title and assume, well, your career must have been straight line. It was very well thought out, very well planned. I went the first 12 years of my career without ever getting a promotion. I did lateral moves. I was 33 years old, 11 or 12 years with the company before I managed anybody, before anybody reported to me. But I was learning. I was moving from this part of the business to that part of the business to that part of the business. I got a chance to go overseas and learn what it's like to work in Asia. So I never said no. I don't regret ever saying yes. But you don't always get the opportunity when you want it at the right time. And career paths are crooked, they're not linear. You know, focus on what you're learning. I know that's easy for somebody with my title to say, but it's true. Well, there's plenty of them. There's lots of outside factors that are, cause us some challenges. The global economy and what's happening with oil prices, because a lot of our raw materials are based on that, and what's happening with currency, because we do business in lots and lots of countries. So those are all challenges, but they're all kind of outside of our control. And so when we think about the challenges, we like to think about what's within our control. And the challenge for us is to change quickly enough so that we can take advantage of the opportunity. So as an example, we are the largest supplier of lubricant additive technology for vehicles powered by internal combustion engines. How would you feel if that was your position today, given everything you read in the press? What would you read in the press that would make you wonder if that's the most stable business to be in?
Electric cars.
Electric cars, right. So what would you do if you were us? What if electric vehicles didn't have lubricants? So there's a couple things that you do. First of all, when you have something like that that potentially threatens your core business, you have to fully understand it. You can't pretend it's not going to happen. You can't just read and hear the things you want to hear, and you have to take a realistic view of it. And we have. I think we have a realistic view, and we have it from authorities, I won't drop names, but from authorities that know this very, very well. And there's a couple things that will happen. There will be a significant amount of electric vehicles in all likelihood in the world in a couple of decades. Over that same time frame, there will also be more vehicles powered by internal combustion engines. And that's just as certain. There will be, over that time frame, more focus on reducing the emissions and improving the fuel efficiency of vehicles powered by internal combustion engines than there ever has been. And I made the comment a little bit earlier, we have spent the last 3 decades doing that, helping enable that. That actually creates a much greater opportunity for us. And electric vehicles create an interesting opportunity, not in lubricants, but in plastics, vehicle interiors, autonomous cars. There will be a whole range of autonomous options. The durability of the interior of a vehicle is going to become a bigger differentiator for whoever's offering, potentially a bigger differentiator. And we do things around synthetic leather for interiors, for the dashboards for interiors. More environmentally friendly than the current materials that are used. So it's actually a very good opportunity for what has been the core business of the company for a long time, but also for us to do different things. Transportation is a much bigger opportunity for us going 30 years into the future than it is today. So that's just one example, but the way you look at challenges like that is say, first of all, really understand what's happening. And it's got to be a unbiased view of it, because you can talk yourself into what might happen that's going to favor you, but it's got to be an unbiased view. And then figure out how can you be unique in that. Back to the question that we started with. So thank you for assuming I get everything done efficiently. That's not all that easy. But it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or if you're an entry-level engineer or if you're in the finance or IT, whatever it is. You have to know what your priorities are. So I'm accountable for the long-term success of the company. And there's a few priorities around that. Those are longer term, some of these things around strategic direction, understanding where the company needs to go, understanding what pieces we need. I spend a lot of time on acquisitions. I spend half my day today on acquisitions, for example. But I know what my priorities are. I have 3 or 4 that I write down every year, and I share with the entire organization. And occasionally I'll do things that are unrelated to that because stuff comes up, But most of what I do is around those 3 or 4 priorities. And they're very thoughtful in terms of what we need to do to improve the long-term success of the company. Now, as you go in different parts of the organization, people will have different objectives. They've got the same challenge. They need to stay focused as well. And so we define accountabilities, what's everybody responsible for, you know? That's how we keep the focus. Ask yourself a question when you get, a job and you're thinking about how do I keep my focus? Why does your job exist? Another way to think about that question is if your job didn't exist, what would the company miss? And that'll probably help define what you're accountable for and what you should be focused on. My wife reminds me to maintain it. It's not easy, and again, it's not just a job like I have, but it's true in a lot of situations. It's back to the focus. You just have to prioritize. I've got some important jobs. Some of them have to do with my family, and some of them have to do with Lubrizol, and I've got to try and balance those as best I can. I wish I had a better answer, but there isn't one. You just have to be mindful of it all the time. And having a spouse or a partner that reminds you of it once in a while is not a bad thing at all. The biggest surprise, and my predecessor was James Hambrick, who was the CEO for, I think, 12 years, and did a fantastic job. The company wouldn't be where it's at, wouldn't probably exist as a standalone company without James. And James warned me of this. He said, you won't know what it's like until you actually sit in the chair. And, I worked for James for quite a while. I can see what he does, and I kind of had a feel for what it must be like. But he was right. You don't actually understand it until you sit in the chair. And what he meant by that was the responsibility for nearly 9,000 people and the long-term success of the company. Because when I was in the job prior to taking over where I'm at now, it was a big job. I had responsibility for one of the major business segments in the organization and so forth, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the total responsibility. And under Berkshire, it's even more so because we operate, independently. Berkshire allows us to make the decisions. A lot of things are delegated to me completely that would typically in a public company be the final decision of the board, of a board of directors. But that really sits with the CEO in the Berkshire model, which in many ways is great, but in other ways there's a little bit of extra pressure to it. So you have full say in pretty much what you do, and potentially access to lots of capital. There's really no excuses, But we'll take it. It's a great situation. There's actually lots of things. It's the variety. Because there's like different things almost every day. It's the variety of things I get to do, and it's the people I get to work with. And I'm not just saying that because a couple of them are sitting here, but that's internal and it's external too. I get to meet some incredible people that are part of Berkshire Hathaway. Not just Warren, but some of the people on the board and some others. The other business leaders, because of the job I'm in, because of the boards I sit on, I get to meet some phenomenal local leaders here in Cleveland and in our industry in general. So it's just the people I get to interact with. That's the most fun. That's the most fun, without a doubt. And you don't have to be in a CEO job to have that kind of response to a question like that. It's kind of like finding a place where you feel like you can be yourself, and it's motivating almost by itself. I think there's a short-term and a long-term aspect to that question. In the short term, you may at times need to be the leader the organization needs you to be. I'm not, in my normal personality, somebody that's going to bang their fist on the table and get excited and start yelling. And I actually don't do that, hardly ever. But there are times when I might need to be more firm than I typically would be, And there may be times when I would rather be, it's almost like being a parent. It's times when I'd rather be a little friendlier with somebody. But was that a hallway discussion with somebody asking them a question? I thought somebody was joining in the discussion. You may need to be the person, you can't be the person you would most enjoy to be because you gotta be something else. But on a long-term basis, if you can't be yourself, it's probably the wrong fit. And I mean long-term, like if month after month you're finding yourself doing things that you don't feel good about, sort of faking a management style to get results. I mean, you'll know it. On a long-term basis, you have to ultimately be yourself. And ideally, the person you like being and being yourself should be fairly similar, right? Ideally. I mean, a lot of this is about getting to know yourself too, and being honest about what you're good at, what you're not so good at, what you need help with. Everybody needs help with something, right? Doesn't matter what job you are, what experience you have, everybody needs to continue developing, and you have to be realistic about that. I hope that was answered your question. Hey, this was a great series of questions. I hope the answers were half as good as the questions, but I really appreciate you spending the time, appreciate the engagement, and I hope it was helpful.
Just a couple things that I want you to try to remember as takeaways from this. And the first is that you can start at a company as a co-op student and work your way all the way up to the top. So as you're picking out those co-op and internship jobs that you're trying to go for, keep that in mind. This is could be the first step to the career that you want to have. And secondly, I think you need to remember the very important message that he gave us, which was he never said no to any opportunity. And that's why I asked you that question, because I wanted you to say that in front of the students. You don't say no, you keep saying yes, and that's what gives you the opportunities. So everyone, please help me thank our guest, Eric Schnur from Lubrizol Corporation.